The man parked the car and rushed to open the door, helping the two men get inside. Once they were inside the house, the man hung up the phone call. He turned to face the two men and tried to explain what had happened. I received a call from my own number, and the person on the other end asked for my help. He told me to bring rope to a specific location, and when I arrived, I found this man hanging upside down from a tree. The man who had been freed from the rope was still disoriented and confused. He didn't remember anything about what had happened to him. The man explained everything to him, including the phone call and the mysterious voice. As they were talking, the phone rang again. It was the same number that had called them earlier. The man who had been missing for days finally recognized the voice on the other end of the line. I know you, he said in a shaky voice. The man on the phone was shocked. You know this person? He asked. The missing man nodded. Yes, it's me.
Right.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you like that, but I needed your help, he said. At this point, the man on the phone was completely confused. He didn't know what to do or say. He had received a call from his own number, and the person on the other end had led him to a missing person who was hanging upside down from a tree. And now that same person was claiming to be the missing person himself. The missing man continued to explain what had happened to him. He had been kidnapped and taken to that location where they hung him upside down in an attempt to scare him. But he managed to free himself using a stick and then ran away. He had no idea how or why he had been chosen, but he was just glad to be free. As the missing man spoke, the man on the phone felt a sense of relief wash over him. Finally, he understood what had happened. He had stumbled upon something that was bigger than he could have imagined. But there was still one question that lingered in his mind. Who had called him and why? He looked at the two men in front of him and asked, "Why did they call me? What was the purpose of all this?" The missing man shook his head. "I don't know. Maybe it was a mistake. They probably meant to call someone else," he replied. The man on the phone wasn't so sure. He had a feeling that there was more to the story, but he didn't know what it was. Despite all the confusion and chaos, one thing was clear. It helped save the life of a missing person, and that was something that mattered the most. In the end, the man on the phone called the police, and they arrived at the house to take the missing man back into custody. Before leaving, the missing man thanked the man on the phone for his help and promised to pay him back. As the police led the missing man away, the man on the phone couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off. He knew that there was more to the story than what was being told. But despite his curiosity, he understood that it was best to let the authorities handle it from there. The following days were filled with questions and speculations. The news of the missing man's disappearance and subsequent return spread like wildfire, but no one knew the full story. The man on the phone received countless calls from friends and family, all wanting to know what had happened. But he didn't know any more than what the media had reported. Despite the attention, the man on the phone couldn't bring himself to talk about the incident. It was as if a dark cloud had been lifted from his shoulders, and he didn't want to disturb the peace that he had finally found. However, there was one person who couldn't stop thinking about the case. That was the detective assigned to the missing man's disappearance. From the moment he heard about the case, he was determined to find out what had happened and who was responsible for the cryptic phone call. The detective gathered all the information that he could find about the man on the phone and the missing man, trying to find a connection between them. But everything seemed to be in order. There was no link between them except for the fact that they had both been involved in the same incident. Days turned into weeks, and the detective was getting frustrated. He had hit a dead end in his investigation and didn't know where to turn next, but he wasn't about to give up. He was determined to solve this case, no matter how long it took. Meanwhile, the man on the phone tried to move on with his life, as if nothing had happened. He went to work, spent time with his loved ones, and tried to forget about the incident. But the detective's investigation kept bringing him back into the spotlight. One day, the detective decided to pay the man on the phone a surprise visit. He stood on his doorstep with a badge in hand, ready to ask some tough questions. The man opened the door and was taken aback by the sight of the detective standing in front of him. The detective wasted no time and began asking questions about the incident. He wanted to know every detail that the man could remember, hoping that it would lead him to a breakthrough in the case. The man answered honestly, but there wasn't much more he could remember. The detective was disappointed, but he wasn't about to give up.